Hello friends, I am Nisha Sharma. The topic under discussion today is a critical appreciation of Byron's poem, There is a Pleasure in the Pathless Woods. The poem, There is a Pleasure in the Pathless Woods, has been written by the most confident, lively, and major romantic poet George Gordon Byron, known simply as Lord Byron. The poem is a small stanza from his famous Child Herald Pilgrimage, Canto 4, verse 178. It is memorable as one of the best short poems of Byron. The poem describes a very young traveler who is thoroughly disenchanted with human society, its artificiality and hypocrisy, and thus travels wide and across in the forlorn lands to find pleasure in nature. The poet finds rest in the serenity of nature, in the music of the deep sea. In his many solitary intercourse with a nature that is still untouched of human demoralization. However, the poet entirely doesn't abandon his love for man and society, but shows a deep distaste for it and asserts that his many interviews with nature has opened the spiritual window of his inner conscience that was lying latent until now and has untied him with the universe to become one and same universe, to become one with the same universe, an experience that he can neither completely express nor conceal. Now, this poem is also known as a as an apostrophe. Byron's poem apostrophe is also known as apostrophe to the ocean is actually one long literary device called an apostrophe. An apostrophe is a form of figurative language similar to personification, but the difference is that in an apostrophe, the writer or speaker is addressing the inanimate object as if it were an actual present character. Now we'll look at the historical context of the poem. There is a pleasure in the pathless woods is a part of a much larger volume, Byron's famous Child Harold's Pilgrimage. Many of the strangers in this story are based on elements of Byron's life up until that point, leading some to describe the poem as being semi autobiographical. Lord Byron himself apparently was unsure about publishing the first two cantos after their completion, concerned about expressing himself so truly in such a public fashion. During the era surrounding the writing and publishing, during the era surrounding the writing and publishing of this poem, Byron spent much of his time traveling, and it is likely that he discovered his own inner need for solitude that eventually resulted in the creation of this verse. One of the things Byron is well known for is that he embarked on a self imposed exile from his homeland and spent much time east of Britain. What is especially known of Lord Byron's personal life is that he was a flamboyant and fairly unorthodox kind of person, especially for the era. He was known for his poor handling of money, his numerous affairs, his bisexuality, and his exile. In short, almost exactly the opposite kind of person that might be associated with a poem of this nature. This speaks a great deal to how deep the inner need for solitude and peace can run, and also that judging individuals based on their most extroverted characteristics is typically a mistake. When the fourth and final canto of Child Harold's Pilgrimage was published, of which this stanza is a part, Lord Byron included a preface that stated that at this point in the story, there was little or arguably no difference between the author of the poem and its narrator. This is undoubtedly a part of what makes this work so popular and so powerful. It is honest. The best poets throughout history have been celebrated for their notable honesty of expression in their poetry, and this is strongly encompassed throughout There is Pleasure in the Pathless Wood. Now, a brief summary of the poem. Strictly speaking, humans are social creatures, and yet the desire for solitude and for silence sometimes feel like one of the most universal human emotions. Everyone from time to time can benefit from being entirely and purely alone. Perhaps this is why paintings and photographs of the natural world, as it was Perhaps this is why paintings and photographs of the natural world are so common and so popular, because the feeling of solitude is universally desired in some capacity. So, when George Gordon Byron, or as he is more popularly known, Lord Byron, wrote the fourth canto of Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, he included what has come to be known as There is Pleasure in the Pathless Woods, the 178th verse of the much larger poem, reflecting a strong desire for solitude and peace. It has become one of his most popular short poems, not an entirely accurate designation, of course, but it is still well worth reading on its own. I love not men the less, but nature more. This line here is an important one because, as was mentioned earlier, humans are social by nature. This isn't the story of an isolated or depressed individual. This isn't an expression of a misanthropy. The narrator doesn't hate humans, but simply prefers the company of nature. From here, There is Pleasure in the Pathless Wood takes an attempt to explain the inexplicable. Comparing moments in solitude to interviews with nature, the narrator declares that he feels closer to the universe itself and feels something that cannot be ignored but cannot be labeled either. It is difficult to describe the feeling of solitude. Sometimes peace alone doesn't feel like the right word. And the sentiments expressed in this poem are complicated and difficult to properly explain. There is no word in the English language to encompass many of these ideas, and yet there is also a clear indication of those emotions in the beautiful language and expression of the poem. Now, the title. The title of the poem, There is a Pleasure in the Pathless Woods, derived from the first line, since this was not written as a solitary poem, is telling enough on its own. To say there is pleasure in a pathless woods is to say there is a certain kind of joy in walking the path that others do not. When someone is walking on a forest trail, anyone else can be on the same trail. But leaving the trail for a different path is making a conscious decision to be alone and to enjoy it. And in the very next line, the concepts of rapture and loneliness are juxtaposed with one another. Loneliness is supposed to be a sorrowful feeling, but the narrator is finding intense joy in it. What is especially interesting is the idea of solitude being its own society. The idea of emptiness, of loneliness, even, is being personified into pleasurable company. The imagery is strong here. The picture painted through Byron's words indicate emerging from a natural forest into a silent shoreline, deep and peaceful, almost as though listening to pleasant music, and no one else is around. Now we come to the theme of the poem. and the theme is man versus nature. The poem Apostrophe to the Ocean is one of the most renowned masterpieces of Byron, which conveys the author's love for nature by including his unique romantic style of writing. As this poem is entirely dedicated to the mighty ocean, the main subject of this work is about man versus nature. Byron also discusses his views about the industrialization throughout the poem. He hints at the deleterious effects of human exploitations. Therefore, the poem Apostrophe to the Ocean paints George Byron's view of the concept man versus nature by revealing his belief. The power of nature is unsurmountable. Furthermore, he reflects his perplexing thoughts about humanity because he cannot conceal his overflowing emotion toward the nature in front of the progressive industrialization. The second and third stanzas discuss the major conflict of the poem, man versus nature. In these parts, Byron concludes that man has ruined the land. He says, man marks the earth with ruin. His control stops with the shore. Even though the humanity has exploited the land, according to Byron, it cannot reach the vast depth of the ocean. Even though the ocean is something mankind has learned to sail upon, the ocean actually controls mankind, leading to many shipwrecks and deaths. It is because the ocean is full of such beauty, mystery, and danger, and so able to kill that the speaker loves the ocean. Byron has made use of many poetic and literary devices in the poem. We'll discuss them one by one. He portrays his ideas and themes in the poem using many literary devices, particularly parallelism and imagery. A writer creates parallelism by creating similarities in words and grammatical structures. Byron also utilizes many poetic devices such as similes and imageries to contribute to the effect. Against the water, a person is just like a drop of rain who can do nothing but sink into its depth with bubbling ground. Furthermore, the author portrays his hatred towards civilization by personifying the ocean. It states, the wild strength he yields for earth's destruction thou dost all despise, spurning him from thy bosom to the skies. Line number 21 to 23. Therefore, our power is oblivious when compared to the ocean's power. In the next two stanzas, Lord Byron uses many allusions to support his position. In line number 36, he says, and laid my hands upon thy main as I do here. The ocean is here presented as a horse which the speaker trusts. The first three lines represents the earth and the ocean as a lonely, solitary scene where no one intrudes. Now, the form of the poem. The stanza, which has been split into two halves here for ease of analysis, is written in what is called Spenserian stanza, a 9-line poem where the first 8 lines are in iambic pentameter and the final line is a 12-syllable iambic line. It also follows the Spenserian rhyming pattern AB, ABB, CB, CC. The style was first developed in 1590 by Edmund Spenser and is first seen in his work The Faerie Queene. After Spenser's death, the style was quickly forgotten but revived later by poets throughout the 19th century like Lord Byron, who were undoubtedly inspired to some degree by his work. Thus, while concluding the poem, we can say the poem Apostrophe to the Ocean encompasses distinguished insights on the nature and civilization. By revealing his love for the ocean, Byron was able to include the romantic elements. He wisely discussed his hatred toward the industrialization and described the mighty capacities of the ocean. Therefore, I believe that George Gordon Byron was successful in painting a powerful picture of the ocean. We can add that the untamable ocean, untamable is uncontrolled. Untamable ocean is about more than just love of nature. To me, the ocean is a tangible expression of the boundless nature of desire, not just sexual desire, but the chaotic, powerful spirit of the desire to live. Byron's poetry, generally speaking, is mostly about Byron. Byron's own life was infamously one of excess and appetite. Eventually, he was forced to flee England because of allegations of incest and sodomy. So, in a way, the famous lines, roll on thou deep and dark blue ocean, roll, 10,000 fleets sweep over thee in vain, describe the ocean as a lawless force that 10,000 navies cannot control or police like Byron himself. But more than that, the ocean is a force of nature that transcends any one individual. Seen in this way, the ocean becomes the natural embodiment of the poet's passion for life. This is not a symbolic connection, but a real one. In the last stanza, the poet declares his affinity for the sea. The image of the poet, born like bubbles on the waves, is one that anyone who has been to the beach can understand. The reality of the power of the ocean is undeniable and obvious, as in the poet's love of the water. The poet is as it were a child of the ocean. The fear it causes is pleasing because the poet trusts the ocean like he would a parent, but also because, as its child, the limitless power of the ocean will also somehow be his inheritance. Thank you.